Welcome to Allow Us to Explain from our national conversation. I am your host, Harmony, and I am the journalism team lead here at ONC. On this episode of Allow Us to Explain, we're talking about gun violence goals. But before we get into that, I'd like for our panelists to introduce themselves.
Yes, so hello everyone. My name is Gabriel. I'm coming from Sherbrooke in Quebec, Canada. I am currently a moderate writer intern here at ONC, where we discussed about various topics that touches the Gen Z.
And that's great. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
I guess we can just start off and dive right in. First, I'd like to just go over a breakdown, like a summary essentially of gun violence and how it affects schools, how it's present in schools. So firstly, in 2023, there were at least 346 school shootings, surpassing the previous year's 308 and 2021's tally of 256, according to the K-12 shooting database. This year, there were at least 50 school shootings that resulted in 15 deaths and 35 injuries in the US. My first question is, was this an issue you worried about when you attended, let's say, high school or elementary school?
Mhm. Yes, well, I was lucky I feel that I was lucky to be in Canada when I was in primary school and high school because we were constantly hearing about the school shootings in the United States. And I thought it was very frightening to see how many school shootings is happening in the United States. And it's not in specific states, it's in all over the country. And when we compare these numbers, like you said, with other countries, it's a bit scary, I believe, to see all that. So I remember when I was in high school, we were doing shooting active shooter drills about once a year, and we were all very nervous to do it, even though we knew that it was all a scene. But I would be very scared if it was happening so frequently in Canada and where when I was in high school.
I definitely, shared those feelings at some point. I no longer attend school in person. When I did in middle school and my elementary school years, I definitely did have those worries. It wasn't a good feeling. And I know my peers shared those feelings as well. So I feel like we were always on edge going to school and doing, normal school activities like recess. We always had those like concerns that something may go wrong or someone would be at the wrong place at the wrong time. My next question is, do you see these problems escalating or de-escalating, in the next few years?
Oh, well, I would definitely see it escalating. I believe that there are not really a lot of solutions that have been brought or have been implemented in the last few years. Um, I remember a specific case that it made the news nationally and internationally. In fact, it was the Uvalde, Texas shooting. I believe it was in 2022. And I remember that at that moment, the governor, Greg Abbott, told that it was a mental health issue and he needed to address that. And then a few months later, he decided to cut millions in healthcare programs to finance other programs in the country that was not related to that problem. So I strongly believe that we hear it a lot and we become more and more used to them, but we do not really want to change a lot of things about it. We do not want to spend any money, or we don't want to spend a lot of time to to solve these problems until it's too late and we get affected by these problems personally. So I truly believe that it will increase over time.
That kind of goes into our next section where we'll be talking about bullying, mental health, and neglect. But first, I really want to dive into bullying because this is something that everyone's experienced. If they've been in the school system, even online, like I am, you still experience bullying. If not, you experience it worse. But first, I wanted to talk about a study conducted by the Journal of Adolescent Health, which used data from the 2011 and 2013 school crime supplement to the National Crime Victimization Survey, so that's something to keep in mind. Eventually, they asked students about being bullied and concluded that about 4.2% of students overall could access a loaded weapon, but those who were traditionally bullied physically or verbally were 2 times more likely to report access. So what this study really did was it connected the dots between students that were bullied and their access to firearms. So this kind of, goes into the question that I want to ask, which is kind of also related to gun control. And my question is, how does gun control factor into this issue?
Well, I think it's one of the biggest factor in that issue is the gun control, like you said. Um, I know that it's very different. My perspective about gun control is very different than most Americans because I do not necessarily live under the same rules, under the same amendments, like the Second Amendment. So I cannot truly understand the value of the Second Amendment that many Americans can feel. But I truly believe that it needs to be unless a small reform to change that, to that people with at least mental health issues or that have been bullied cannot go to directly to that ultimate solution. Solution is, of course, an objective word here, but I truly believe that there should be at least mental health issues or examinations before people can access to guns, of course.
I think gun control is something that really needs to be addressed, and I see hopes for it because, Gen Z is directly impacted by this issue as gun control. I mean, as access to guns become much easier for our peers. I think we, increasingly get concerned about it. So I'm not saying they're gun like addressing the gun problem isn't going to happen, but I definitely see it being, directly correlated to gun violence, obviously. And my next question is, what can society do as a whole to address bullying? This can include like those organizations that you see that say that do those things like no to bullying, those campaigns, that also is included. But I just want to ask, what like in a perfect society, what do you think that looks like when it comes to bullying?
Well, that's a very a very good question. Um, as a society, of course, there needs to be people need to be more sensibilized about the issue, about what happens before school shootings happen. I believe that in the news we hear a lot about the school shootings, about the statistics, but we do not really understand everything that is happening in the life of the shooters before they eventually do that. So I believe that if we have a better collective understanding about the problems of the in the life of the shooters before the eventual shooting, I believe that this can be a great avenue that we can take about solidarity, about help towards another, because I think that we are going into a more and more individualized society where we do not necessarily understand or try to understand the other's opinion or the other's personal problems, and that directly affects the problems that we see about bullying. We do not see about all of the consequences about bullying in our schools. I don't know if there are many programs that are implemented in all schools, especially in public schools, about bullying and mental issue problems that the students can feel at school.
Additionally, through my experience being in the public school system for as long as I was, I think those campaigns that, you receive when the people would come into school and they would talk to you about bullying and what to do when you're bullied, those were pretty beneficial to us because when, me and my peers, when we were bullied, we knew what to do. But I feel like in some cases that's not done enough. Like I feel like those campaigns that we saw when people came in to talk about not just bullying, but drugs and all of those other things that were affecting youth. I think that needs to be done more. And in a perfect society, as I mentioned, I think more of those campaigns and more of just like outside support is, pretty much very beneficial to the development of youth, especially when we're thinking about, safety. That's definitely a big factor. I think awareness is really like a game changer when it comes to issues, not just like bullying, gun violence. A lot of issues can be solved with the first step being awareness. So we know that, in the US, gun violence is increasingly common. I want to ask, how does experiencing gun violence affect our mental health?
Well, I believe that with it evolves through time, I think. Um, Especially with internet and video games. I think we are getting more normalized to see such violence in our feed every day. And I believe that maybe we are experiencing somewhat of a bit of a depression, a collective depression when we are hearing about this because it's not all school shootings that are covered in the news nationally. So hearing from time to time, every time one school shooting in the country is somehow we are getting deceived to hear about it, but we do not understand the whole problem, the whole issue in the country. And I think that it clearly affects our mental health, but I think it affects even more the parents of the victims and also the younger people, the younger students, because we are not all Gen Z are especially not really touched by this issue. I think a lot of people are touched about it, but we it's not necessarily our kids that are being touched. It's not ourselves that are being attacked under the current school shootings, but we are still affected because we see the evolution, we see the difference between when we went to high school and today, even though there were many school shootings when we were in high school, but today there are still a lot more school shootings that are happening. And I think that we are all affected differently, even though we do not have the same age. So I think collectively we are all affected at least a bit about this issue.
Yes, I definitely agree. You brought up a lot of things I'd like to, go more in depth on, especially like when we're talking about frequency, right? The frequency of the gun violence in schools today is way more than what it was, say, like 30, maybe 40 years ago. And that same fact can be applied throughout the decades. So I think now more than ever, a um a level of importance on this problem needs to be, stressed, that for one. And then also when we take into account, all of the people that are affected from the loss of one child's life, because you have to think about the parents, you have to think about the siblings, you have to think about the person's friends. There's so many people that, are affected when something like this happens in schools. And just in general, like a person's circle can be so big. So I feel that, society as a whole, these things, when we see them, when we hear about them, it doesn't make anybody feel good, right? I think when when stuff like this happens and at the frequency as high as it is now, I think like you said, it brings a collective depression on society, and it doesn't make anyone feel good. When we already have, a surplus of problems to deal with, like the economy and the changing landscape of everything, I think the last thing we need is the one place for children to go to be safe and to be educated, to be infiltrated and become unsafe. So it's never good. And I think as it escalates, which I'm sure it will, the problem will only continue to get worse. But next, I kind of want to go into a higher note because all of this is very unfortunate, and no one really likes to have these types of conversations when we're talking about the loss of life, especially children. But I want to ask, how can we empower ourselves after experiencing or maybe even just hearing about gun violence? What can we do to, you know, flip to a new side and think more optimistically?
I think that it will be difficult in the short time to overcome this fear because it's a very distressful situation. Um, I think that over time, more and more people would be victims of that. And I think that if they can all collectively share their fears and um, do testimonials about what is happening, I truly believe that it can help the society to better understand the situation. But at the same time, it's sad to see that sometimes, even though people that witnessed such school shootings are being called liars, I remember a few years ago, there was a school shooting in the United States, and a lot of students decided to advocate to gun reforms. And then a lot of rumors were wandering around that it was all false, that they were lying, and it never really happened. And even Congress people were running against them and calling them liars. And I truly believe that that's not really how this situation should be handled, because it this situation truly happened. There were facts, there were victims, there were testimonials saying it really happened. But moreover, it's not usual. Even though this situation did not happen, many school shootings happened, and many people were traumatized because of that. So even though one situation that was true, but was, if if through time it happened that it was false, well, this situation truly happened in other times, truly happened in other states, and frequently, probably some school shootings happen the same day too. So I truly believe that sometimes people are just closed-minded, and it's difficult to open their mind, to open their perception, because yes, gun ownership is a very important right in the United States. I can understand that some people really advocate for that, but at the same time, guns are violent, guns are dangerous, and there should be. And it's not because someone can handle them, then the person beside them can use it too. I recently saw in the news that a 6-year-old shot one of his teacher, and it's truly disturbing to see that. And all the consequences were that I think it was the vice president of the school was forced to step down as vice president. But it's only the only consequence that we see that were taken. No gun reforms, no adoption, no really review of anything, no really responsibilities towards the parents, because the parents also have a responsibility, I believe, in these situations. So it's really interesting, but at the same time, a bit scary to see the outcome of all these strategies.
I definitely agree, and I can kind of find a one word where all of what you said can be summarized with, and I say it's solutions. And when we're talking about empowering ourselves after hearing about, these tragedies, we need to seek solutions. And a part of the solutions include, gun reform, proper mental health, being prioritized within our youth, and then just, again, like properly educating people about how to handle guns, how to store the guns, how to keep them out of reach of your children, because doing things like that can help us as a nation avoid the loss of life of children, by the tons. So I think when we seek out solutions, that's the best way we can, deal with these things, hindering on society. And then additionally, like you said, it's not going to be short term. No one can expect to, relieve themselves of these thoughts or these problems, immediately. We can definitely take action and, move towards a society where these things aren't as common, where it's not as frequent. I'd like to bring up like this isn't an issue that is exclusive to the US. There's been other countries that have had these problems and were able to nip it in the bud pretty quickly. For instance, there was Australia, who I wouldn't be able to recall the specific name of this issue, of this incident, but it was essentially a really big massacre where someone used a firearm and they executed around 39 people. And this was, biggest tragedy that was to take place in the country. And because of that, it led to, tons of legislation being passed. And now when you are living in Australia and you want to get a firearm, there are so many more restrictions. There's so many more things that you have to go through. There's many processes that we don't even include in the US. It's a lot harder to get your hands on the firearm in Australia than it is over here. So I think another part of, seeking out solutions is looking at what other countries are doing, because this isn't a problem that's just exclusive to us. many other countries have had instances with this, and they were able to effectively take care of it. So next,
If
I kind of want to
if
go
you may,
into
I can share just I just want
yeah.
to add one thing. When you were talking about examples, here in Quebec, a few decades ago, um, someone decided to go into a school that were about to become people that was working for more male jobs, like in construction and everything. It was the school in studies just for that. And then someone, a man, probably as we call it today, an incel, decided to go into that school. He entered. He had an AK-47, if I remember correctly. He entered in a class. He separated men and women, and he decided to shot all the women. And this was a terrifying situation. That it was a trauma that was shared among every Quebecers in Quebec. And it happened in the 90s, and still today, every year at the same date, we commemorate the loss of all these 14 women that were killed only because they were women. And we see that the killer had a lot of mental issues, mental health issues, and we decided to help to seek help for these people that show these traumatic symptoms. And we see that we are more also open to equality between the two genders, the genders, in fact. So I truly believe that if we do not see a general shock, a cultural shock in the society, I do not know how we can really see a big change, a drastic change in America's society. So I just want, because we were talking about in other places in the world, I just wanted to share that story. But it really changed the perception in Quebec about gun control, but also about mental health issues and also the equality between men and women.
And I think like you touched on a really good point that unfortunately is kind of true is that culture shock. I think in the US we're so used to it now, it kind of numbs us. So, when we think about solutions, when we think about addressing the problem, it's kind of like no one, I don't want to say no one cares because of course people care, but it's not as urgent as it needs to be. And that's unfortunately the case. I wish it wasn't, but again, Gen Z is proving to be a generation that really wants change. So hopefully within the next, couple years, maybe even within the next decade, we can see some change coming from our generation because we are the ones, being directly impacted by this. Our siblings are the ones being directly impacted by this. And there's so many other people that are affected when, the loss of a child happens. So I can't say that I'm positive immediate change will be sprung about, but I can say I have some hope for Gen Z, just a little bit. Next, I want to go into kind of like what I consider to be the bigger section of our discussion, and this is neglect. Now, um, I want to just reference a very popular case that took place, and its court proceedings actually just ended, I think, a month ago or maybe a few weeks ago, and it's the Oxford High School shooting. Now, this was a mass shooting that occurred at Oxford High School in the Detroit suburb of Oxford Township, Michigan, and of course, it's in the U.S. A young man by the name Ethan Robert Crumbley, who was age 15, armed with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun, murdered 4 students and injured 7 people, including a teacher. Now, there's 2 points that I really want to bring up when we're talking about the Oxford High School shooting. This for one is that Ethan's parents were pretty significant when we're talking about the repeated cycle of gun violence, and because they're the first parents to be charged um, as a result of their child going into a school and shooting, which is pretty significant because it shouldn't have taken this long for them to be the first to be charged. And then additionally, it's the fact that Ethan had really severe mental health issues. Now, when I say severe, I mean he actually texted his mom or he communicated with his mother that like he needed help and she just neglected it very instantly, just dismissed it. And that was a direct cause for him going into the school and harming people. Now, I want to ask, how damaging is neglect for young children or even children as old as Ethan was?
When we are young, we always look at our parents as models, as people, as protectors for us. And I believe that every children should be able to talk openly to their parents about their own problems or own issues. And I think it's a role for the parents to assess these issues, to talk with his children too, because a lot of children, when they become teenagers, they are become more reserved. They tend to keep to themselves and not really open to their parents. And it's at that moment that parents should be more skeptical or be more open-minded to talk with their teenagers. And now they have clear proof that he opened up, Ethan opened up, he talked to their parents, and their parents did, I believe they did not necessarily do their parental job there. And I truly believe that if the parents cannot do really their job, I don't know who really can help them when we are teenagers, because we can talk to our friends, but our friends are not really used to talk to other children to assess these kind of problems either, because parents have like somehow a formation, if I can say that. They are being trained a little bit since they their child was born to know better their children, to know when they are feeling good, know when they are feeling bad. And yes, in brief, I truly believe that parents should be more involved in these decisions, and they should be at least partially accountable about the situation, because it's your children. It's still under your jurisdiction to help to um, to assess all the problems that your children have. So, yeah, I truly believe that parents should be more involved here.
I think as we get older, we do tend to shy away from our parents, but again, it's really imperative that parents continue to check in on their children, spend time with their children. I feel when I was learning about the Ethan Crumbley case, I felt that he wasn't really cared for by his parents. He wasn't given the attention that he needed, clearly, because he did what he did. But a lot of things could have been avoided with this issue. He should have gotten the mental health help he needed. He should have gotten that parental support. He should have really just been paid attention to. If they didn't decide to neglect him and, neglect his mental health issue, a lot of things could have been avoided. Now, when I talk about, like, that parental support, I don't just mean, like, being like, "Hey, son, how's school?" Stuff like that. I mean, like, really just interacting with your child. And I see this a lot when I go out. I see this a lot when I'm just, with my friends. I feel that even now, their parents don't pay as much attention to them as mine do. Like when I come home from somewhere that I went to, I, immediately am the center of attention. I'm not saying this is, necessary for every child. Not every child may not like that. But I think that needs to be the case. There needs to be more importance placed on their children, and they shouldn't just be given an iPad or just given an iPhone, and because that really just puts a band-aid on their like need for attention or their need for significance or importance. It just puts a little coin in their bucket. So I think you know permanent or real solutions need to be given to children, like hey, come sit with us, come watch TV. Like real things, real moments of interaction need to happen, because I feel like it's way too common. It's more common than it should be that kids are being neglected, or that parents really aren't doing their job and they just want their kid out of the face. But I don't want to ramble on. I do want to go next into our next question, and I want to ask, how does teacher neglect impact students? Now, when I say this, I mean basically, what is the consequence of a teacher doing exactly what Ethan's parents did when they're met with a student that has mental health issues and they decide not to do anything about it?
Yes, of course, the teacher's responsibility into that is also important, but at the same time, I don't really know the current situation in schools and everything, but the teachers also have a lot of students to teach. They also have a lot of students under their charge, and they do not necessarily have the resources to pay attention to each and every one of them because they see, I don't know what is the process in high schools, but they do not see them every day. In my case, I saw teachers like maybe 2 or 3 times every 9 days, so I do not necessarily have the time to connect with them or to talk with them and to be more to talk about my personal problems with them. But at the same time, they are a resource. They are a resource to the children too, to the students too. So if they they see maybe someone has a concerning behavior or something like that, they should raise it and to have time to discuss with them, to take them aside and not necessarily attack them or think about the worst situation that the children would do, but just to take a conversation to talk about what is happening, how it's going at home, how is it going at school? Do you have any friends? Are you intimidated or something like that? Are you bullied or something like that? I think that these simple questions that do not take necessarily an hour to go to talk about would really help decreasing the risk of school shootings among students who have difficulties or to show mental health problems. Um, I again, I don't know everything, all the structure about the becoming a teacher, but people who are becoming teacher or who have a bachelor in teaching, I truly hope they have at least one class about mental health problems and the symptoms of them to at least raise some flags to some students sometimes when there is a recurring behavior of mental health issues. I truly believe that at least that would help to target the students who would be more at risk and then reduce the risk at the same time of school shootings.
Definitely agree with you. Now to offer a little bit more perspective, um, for when I was in school, in middle school, we saw our teachers every day. We went into school, we did our I had 8 classes that I would go to every day. And I would interact with my teachers. They would be directly teaching me. And then my classes, if I were to describe them numerically, typically were about 20 to 26 people. So these were kind of big classes. Now, I think in that case, when we're talking about teachers that are directly instructing students every day, I think when they neglect students, it's pretty detrimental. I know it's very difficult to attend to every student when you have classes of, 20 or more. But I do think if a student were to come to you the same way Ethan came to his parents and said, like, I have mental health issues, immediately act on it because the next day that student can come to school and do something that everyone wouldn't want to have happen. So I think in that instance, of course, act on it immediately. Now, when teachers are unable to get to everyone, I think having like what I call those campaigns, having school assemblies where people come in and they talk about things like bullying, when they talk about things like prioritizing your mental health, how you can prioritize your mental health. That is also a really great way for teachers to stop the cycle of neglect on their students. And then this way, I think when you have those school assemblies, I think students um, they're in the mindset of thinking about their mental health, and then is when they're more likely to talk to teachers. So I think it creates a good, healthy pattern of students connecting with their teachers, and I think that is really good. When I was in middle school, I unfortunately did not have any of those school assemblies like at all, which I thought was a really big problem because that shouldn't have been something that was just exclusive to me when I had it in elementary school. I thought that would continue throughout the years. I still have yet to be to one, even though we learn online, we still have online events where we can go and, a couple weeks ago we had a virtual field trip. So we still like gather together as students. I think things like mental health, things like bullying, pretty much all of these issues that youth are likely, susceptible to, they need to be addressed by the masses. So I think that offers a really good, a really good solution to teachers, and it gives them a way to interact with their students that's less tedious. And when I talk about like things being tedious, and like it kind of goes into the next question. I want to ask, what are some realistic solutions to teachers being more involved in student safety? You can think of a good example as those school assemblies where people would come in and campaign, give a presentation about mental health, give a presentation about safety, just things like that. What are some more solutions that teachers can utilize to help prioritize student safety?
In our high schools in Canada, we have social intervenants, so people that intervene in schools with students who have mental health problems or are not feeling very well mentally. And I truly believe that if we can put that too with to help the teachers or to help the students feeling better, just to have a discussion from time to time, I truly think that can be a great solution. But of course, it costs a lot of money. I can understand that having a psychologist or a shrink there every day to help with the students can be very expensive to private schools and to public schools. But at the same time, I really think that it's necessary. One of the solutions that I heard that I was a bit surprised to hear that to let teachers more involved would be to give them a gun in schools. So if there's an active shooter in schools, well, they should be armed to kill the shooter. But at the same time, I'm a bit skeptical about that because how would the gun would be hidden? Because there's in elementary schools, students do not really know what is a gun and what are the damages that they can do, so they can maybe find it and then shoot anybody that they want. So it's very dangerous, that problem. But at the same time, it's not because the teacher is an adult that all teachers do not have mental health problems either. So if one teacher is feeling not very good, it has they have mental health problems, well, what would restrain them to use their own gun to do another school shootings or shoot themselves in front of students? Like there are so many problems that this solution may bring. One, if it's not well taken in charge, and also if it's just applied normally. Like I truly do not believe that bringing more guns will help lower the number of school shootings because they will continue to happen. They will just maybe have less victims if the teachers can kill the shooter before there are many casualties, but they will still continue to happen. So this solution is very, I think, it's not really a plausible one. I do not think it's something that we should move on from for this one. But teachers can be more involved, like you said.
I definitely agree. I think that solution is, for one, bogus. And I don't think anyone with real teaching experience would advocate for that because teachers aren't there to shoot and kill people. They're there to teach and they're there to cater to students. So I don't think that really offers any good solution. And then again, another issue that can arrive with that is students that want to go and do these crimes, they won't have to bring their own gun now. They can just use the school's gun, which is not good. You're just adding more fuel to the fire. I think it's really needs to start with awareness and needs to start with teachers being more involved in their students and parents being more involved in their kids. And it kind of goes into our next section as well when we're talking about safety and school policy. So I think a really good example in this case, when we're talking about things that schools and teachers should be doing, can be used from the state of New York. Now, New York has a new, like, they implemented a new solution for this called a school safety improvement team, which is designed to develop things to help schools under attack or like in the event of an active shooter. For instance, they have what they call an emergency response plan template to provide districts with an outline for high quality emergency response plans. This includes creating an online submission process, developing common language emergency response terminology, developing guidelines on door locks, door barricading policy, and physical security, In another case, I'm not sure if this is exclusive to the state of New York, but I did see a school that implemented another solution where, in the event of an active shooter, the teacher could take like a corner of the room, there'd be this little pocket that they could pull on, and it would pretty much just expand into a whole nother room within the classroom that students could go into and hide. Now, I will say it is a pretty effective solution if the shooter weren't, for one, didn't know about it, two, wasn't already in the room, like pulled the pocket and expanded the room already. Now, my question about this issue is, what can law enforcement and schools do to ensure better safety when we're talking about, maybe new door barricading policy, just things like that? What are some more solutions that schools can employ to ensure better safety among their students?
Mm. That's a very good question. I think people are getting more and more creative with alternatives. Um, I think that in order to be sure that it's everything is safe, maybe for the on the first floor of every school, there shouldn't be any classes close to windows because they may enter by windows and even though the doors are all locked, sometimes when it's the summer mostly also in southern states, they open the windows and that's an easy way in for shooters. Um, However, I think yes, that's an important solution. I think it would be really very difficult to implement, but also the door locks is I think one of the safest solution that we can have, or bulletproof windows also. I think it's very intense, but at the same time, I think we are going to that moment where we do not have any other choices than to put bulletproof windows, bulletproof doors to assure that people cannot enter in schools with by just firing in windows or in doors. So I think that would be another solution. I know it's expensive again. I know the money is always an issue here, but at the same time, we do not have really any other solutions. We do not have a solution that costs no money or no time. We have to invest a lot of efforts, a lot of time, a lot of money to solve this problem and to save the children's lives. I believe that the main priority here is our children. So yeah.
I definitely agree. Like any solution that we sought, well, that we go after or that we want will definitely take a lot of effort on behalf of people, on behalf of our governments, on behalf of everyone. It's going to take a lot of energy. And then additionally, just ensuring that there are more trained law enforcement on the property, that would be really good. That would probably save a lot of effort. So I think when you ensure that capable law enforcement are on campus, I think that also goes a long way along with employing all of these things that New York is doing, or maybe even just adding metal detectors to your doors. I think starts with tweaking the way you currently do things. So that's um, another good method that schools can employ.
I just have one more thing to say. I just thought about it. I think since the last since the last year, some public schools in South Florida now require all students to bring transparent backpack to go to school. And I laughed a little bit about it because I was like, are we there now? Are we obligated to bring transparent bags now because we cannot control because they cannot control their guns? This sometimes I feel like it's going too far and we are not currently assessing the main problem that is the guns and the mental health issues, and we're just trying to cover a whole wound with just a band-aid. With some solutions, I'm like, I think we should go deeper than only talking about how are they bringing guns. It's like why are they bringing guns? I think that's the main question here that we should ask ourselves.
I feel that way as well when I hear certain solutions like transparent backgrounds, and then also like the what we talked about earlier with having a gun on school campus to take out the shooter. I think why has it come this far to where we're thinking about doing things like that? Like these problems should be addressed at the top, like addressing gun control, ensuring that people have proper mental health support. I think there's so many there. Those are really the two bigger issues that we need to think about. And I think when we go the route of, giving teachers guns and making kids come to school with transparent backpacks, I think all we're doing is putting a band-aid on the problem, or we're just trying to curb it and not address the real issue. My next question is kind of more about what students can do to stay safe in the event of like an active shooter, or even if they just have concerns that they aren't unsafe, they aren't safe. What could students do to advocate for themselves?
Well, I think that we all know someone when we went to high school that we felt it he was or she was or they were more reserved, they were more introverted, and we always thought we always perceived them as a bit weird, but at the same times, we don't know what everyone is going through at home or personally in our personal lives. I truly believe that if we think that someone seems to have mental health issues or something like that, we can talk to that to our about that to our teachers or to the dean or to go straight talk to them and ask them how are they feeling, how to just to talk a little bit about them because they are the mental problems, the mental health issues can be solved just by a discussion. And it's not, we don't need to talk about especially the mental health problems. We just need to have a normal conversation with someone new, and we discover something new, someone completely new that we did not think that they would be like that. And I truly believe that students, just by talking to each other, just by discussing with other students to see if maybe they have concerns and they should be addressed and they can talk to the teachers or to their parents too. I truly believe that that can be solved. That can be a great way to advocate to reduce school shootings.
I think when we're talking about from the student perspective, I think three things need to be like on the mind of students when we're talking about giving support. Is one, making sure that your friends are okay, making sure that you will have heart-to-heart conversations about your friends, about your concerns, because yes, those conversations are awkward and they're not very cool, but um you get that closure. So I think that for one, you definitely need to talk about it. And then for two, I think it's pretty imperative that students talk to their teachers about it as well, like not just their peers, but their teachers. When you talk to administration, when you talk to school therapists, if your school has one, I think when you put it on the radar of the administration and you let them know that it's you having these issues, it's you and your peers, I think they take it more seriously because it, makes it more realistic. Like, oh yeah, what if, that happens? They actually, it turns the gears in their head and it forces them to actually consider if that were to actually take place. So my last question before we wrap up is what does the future of gun violence in schools look like to you?
Um, Not bright. I may be a bit more pessimistic here, but I do not think that we will see a big change in the near future, or at least in the future. Um, we currently see that guns are really important to so many people in the United States, and we are not ready to do some compromise. And I'm saying compromise, not sacrifices, really compromise to assure that our children are safe in the school in our schools. I truly believe that um, the, the 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 advocacy for guns for guns is so powerful in the United States that we cannot really do anything drastic for the moment, and I do not think that we will see important or significant evolution in the near future. Um, even if all our federal or local governments would advocate on that, would work on that, it will be simply too difficult and there would be too much at stake for them to take a stance on this issue.
As I mentioned, Gen Z, when we're made aware of an issue, we do try our best to handle it. You can think of things like animal rights. We've done a lot for that. You can think of environment, like when there's an issue that we really put our mind to and we really want to address, there's some hope. I definitely see maybe within the next decade or two, Gen Z will do something. I really hope that I'm right, and in the event that I'm wrong, I really, really don't see a bright future for this country when it comes to gun violence in schools. I think a lot of people are going to do what I considered a few years ago and leave when the problems are addressed. And when we have people leaving, that's not very good for a country. It starts other problems like not enough people in our military and things like that. So, uh, addressing this problem can help us avoid many others. But with that, I would like to thank you, Gabe, for tuning in and attending the podcast. I want to thank the audience for tuning in and listening. And then you can follow our national conversation on TikTok and Instagram at our national conversation and on X, or formerly known as Twitter, at RNATL Convo. And then finally, you can visit our website at ournationalconversation.org. You can follow this podcast and other podcasts from our national conversation on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and everywhere podcasts can be found. And then our next episode on Allow Us to Explain will be about 15-minute cities. So tune in to listen to that.